The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. The Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinski. On my right, Christopher K. Shortell, Republican Town Councilor, and our special guest in the studio tonight. He is the chair of the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission, Jim Seichter. Jim, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me, I think.
I like the attitude. I like the attitude already. We got a lot of ground to cover, so let's just jump right into it. We've talked a lot about downtown development, you and I, and on many episodes over many years. And when we talk about planning and zoning, a lot of people think right away about downtown development and the changes that are going on down there. So it's good that we have Jim Seichter in the studio. Jim, when we talk about downtown, and most people say, gee, it would be great if we could revitalize it somehow. What are the tools in the toolbox? And I think when I hear this, no one's really talking about the challenge, the geographic challenges about the downtown. You got the cemetery on one side of Center Street, which means there's no retail stores or, to add population and other businesses to have a symbiotic relationship with the other side of the street. You got a steep hill going from the old train station up to North Main, and pedestrians, that's tough for them. Holy Trinity Church is there, and down the hill you have what I call Malfunction Junction. This terribly complicated Hall Street, Quinnipiac, Route 5 coming out on both ends, and Center Street coming down. How much can be done, do you think? What's, from an aspirational point of view, what can we really do to revitalize?
Well, certainly we can't move the church. We can't relocate the cemetery. I think from the standpoint of the Planning and Zoning Commission, what we can do is look to put regulations in place that encourage development, and that's what we attempting to do with right now with our town center regulations, to provide additional opportunities for developers. Some of the things that we did, we lessened the parking requirement.
You're talking about the town center regs now?
On the town center regs, that's correct.
Okay.
We lessened the parking requirements. We also made it a lot easier where people are looking to change uses. If you're changing a use now, other than increasing residential use, you don't have to apply for or meet the parking requirements for a new use.
Can you give me a specific example? Make one up or something.
Oh, sure. Let's say if I had a property on Center Street, and right now I had a retail business in there, that requires a certain amount of parking per square foot. Now, if I wanted to put a restaurant in there, that requires more in the way of parking spaces. So I'd have to meet the parking requirement for the restaurant under the old regulations. Under the new regulations, if I'm changing a tenant in the property or a use in the property, I don't have to meet the new regulations or the parking regulations. You're essentially grandfathered for the parking that you have, other than residential. If you're increasing the residential number of residential units, then you need to meet the parking. So, that creates some opportunities. Also for people that are looking, or a developer that's looking to perhaps redevelop a property entirely, and if they can't meet the parking requirements, we have offsets. They can apply for up to 65% of the parking to be offset if they make a contribution to the town of $2,000 of parking space. That's a one-time contribution, so you can do that. So that helps to alleviate.
Has anyone taken advantage of that yet?
No one's taken advantage of that specific. I'd certainly like to you know, we'd like to have seen someone to be able to do that. Right now, there's been very few people that have taken advantage just of the new regulations. We had the old police station town hall. On that one, we have an application under the new regulations. So that's one. You know,
What's going to happen with
well, that
with
would
it?
that would be residential, and one of the
Okay.
areas there would, again, having to meet the parking now.
Okay.
So the idea is to convert that to parking. Just not too far from where we are right now with Jake's. What they were able to do now, they're looking to requested to have office use on the second floor. They didn't have enough parking under the old regulations. Now they can put the office in there, and parking is an issue. You know, the other thing that the regulations included was allowing for four-story buildings. Now, some people may like them, some people may not. But we felt in order to make certain properties, or the properties in downtown perhaps economically viable, you needed to put more, needing to allow more units in those properties.
Let them go up higher, one
Yeah,
story
let
in
them
some
go up higher,
cases,
but
or yeah.
there's design standards that we put in there, or form standards, where you just can't put a rectangular box. You need offsets on the facade. You need a certain amount of windows. It's same on the roof line. So again, we're very conscious about what the look is. So those are some of the things that we put into the regulations. And I will say that with the town center regulations, we've spent a good deal of time on that. We've had 4 workshops and 2 public hearings until the regulations were finally approved. So I certainly feel that there hopefully has been, input from some of the stakeholders. We are looking, however, to make some minor modifications in those regulations to include some additional uses. And we are having a workshop on that in February 4th, so I'd encourage, anyone, whether you're a downtown property owner or simply a resident of the town, to come to our workshop, express some of your opinions. And it's always beneficial, whether it's for town center or any other regulations or any other ideas, because I think we always say, we're certainly open to criticism, but constructive criticism is generally the most beneficial criticism.
Chris?
Well, this is fascinating to me in terms of the process. I was going to ask, how often do you change regs? It sounds like this doesn't happen every day. So the ones you just mentioned, where you had the multiple workshops, is this like a once in a decade thing, or you do it all? You're looking at it all the time, and
I like to say that we're looking at it. I won't say all the time, but when issues are raised, clearly we would have the workshops, or we'd have workshops on certain issues. Right. Again, we have a workshop now. It'll be our probably second or third workshop, which is also going to be in conjunction with the town center with our IX and I-5, and looking to make some modifications to that. Going back some time, we had workshops on incentive housing zone. When issues come up that we feel are important or that have been raised by the public, we'd certainly be open to doing that.
That's great.
Because, the zoning regulations, they're not a static document. Because economics change, zoning changes.
So at your workshops, the public can talk.
Well,
we encourage the public to talk.
If I didn't say it, he was going to say it.
Do you have, but it's a good point, do you have a public question and answer component built into your meetings?
Into the workshops themselves?
Or both, either one.
Well, I guess let's start with the workshops. With the workshops, typically how the format is, we'll have a presentation from our town planner. We'll have then comments by commission members, and then we open it up to the general public to speak and voice their opinions, concerns, ideas, and most of the time we get some very, very valid and very good opinions and concerns and suggestions. As far as just our typical meeting, when we're looking at applications and acting on applications, obviously for a public hearing, the public has the opportunity to speak and they're allowed to speak. On special permits, it's not a public hearing, but since I've been on the commission, it's always been a tradition for the commission to allow the public to speak. So I like to feel that we are very, very open to the public. from a commission standpoint, and clearly people, anyone who has questions, concerns about zoning issues, our town planner, Casey Costello, her door is always open and certainly willing to talk to people, as well as our economic development specialist, Tim Ryan,
Okay.
is very open and I think very aggressive in, discussing issues with interested developers or existing businesses.
So Chris, did he sell that well? I thought he sold that really well.
Well, I was going to say,
Really well, better than any of you guys ever sold,
I was there, I want to say, so I went to a recent my first planning and zoning meeting about the pool in December.
December.
And
Okay.
Chairman Seichter said, he said typically, public comment, he basically just said, it's not part of the agenda, but this is a big deal. And I got to come to the mic and give constructive feedback, but it was awesome so it was really cool that was allowed. And
Yeah.
as you know, the town council will be opening up its rules of procedure as we do at the beginning of every term. So
Another show. This
another
is not,
show.
yeah,
I'm just
another
saying
show.
though,
That's another
interesting.
show.
I know, just saying though, interesting comparison.
So I want to stick to the sort of the downtown area for a bit, and then we'll wander off to some other issues, the I-5, I-X, I think we'll cover those. But the area closer to the old train station, the new train station, sort of Route 5, it's really ugly. Not that anyone can do anything about it, but you got those overhead wires that are thick as I don't know what. You've got some properties. They are what they are. You got an ugly cemetery wall. What can be done? What is being done? What's being thought about?
Well, I
That's-
think, again, from the town standpoint, what I just mentioned, as far as from a regulation standpoint, to try to make it more attractive for a developer to come in and try to make it more economic.
Well, I've been reading about this transit-oriented strategy and walkability studies and things like that, and I don't know if it's going to amount to anything. And I just wanted you to get into that and
Well, that's a good question, whether it will or not.
describe those things.
The jury's out on that. It hasn't even been impaneled.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things that are going on with that. One is there's a pedestrian let me get this right. It's pedestrian connectivity improvement study. And that's being done through the state and through a state grant. We received.
I got to stop you.
Sure.
Pedestrians are going to connect to each other, or is this walkability?
It's walkability. Mike, you like to call it walkability. The
Yeah,
state calls
okay.
it pedestrian connectability.
I just wanted to clear that up.
Now,
Okay, go
and it's
ahead.
a study that's being done. It was a grant that was received by the town for about $175,000. The town's matching, I think, was about $35,000. And basically, it's doing a survey of really that Route 5 corridor that you mentioned from Hall Avenue up to the platforms. To look at that, to survey it, look at some of the challenges from a walkability standpoint. I think we all know that when you walk down Route 5 on the west side of the street, you have telephone poles in the center of the sidewalk. There's a very limited space between the sidewalk and the road. There's really no crossing areas. As you mentioned, you have the overhead wires. The idea of this survey is to look and see what can be done, perhaps underground the utilities. Obviously, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to that. Who's paying for that? So those are the issues. But we're anxious to have that information provided to us. So at least it's a starting point to look at some of the ideas that perhaps could or can't be done.
So it's a beautification. If
Yeah,
another word
exactly.
might be a beautification. And then, to what end, I wonder? Beautification has its own value, I suppose. But is this tied to economic development or tax
Well, no, of
dollars,
course.
or how does this?
Well, if we're looking to have that corridor developed, and again, in the not too distant future, once we have this survey that was done and another one that's being done by the Department of Transportation, then the Planning and Zoning Commission will look to develop some transit-orient district regulations. And that would be for that corridor leading from, let's call it, Hall Avenue up to and perhaps a little bit beyond the train station, and looking for development of that. some time ago, there was another study done that looked at the development possibilities of that whole area and how many units could be put in. And I think right now in that general corridor, and it includes some of the area around the train station also, there's maybe 66 residential units. The potential build-out could be 666 units now. Does anyone think that that's going to happen?
Yeah, right.
I don't think so. But again, we're looking at some of this information to help at least start to develop some regulations, because the idea would be if you can make it walkable, then people who are taking the train and certainly have a better chance to make it into the town center, as well as creating some housing around that area and mixed-use housing.
So for that component, and there's another study I want to talk about in a minute, but for that component, what are the time targets? What should, in another few months, another few years, or when we would see, the results of the
Well, I
study?
think the study itself, I believe that's approaching the draft stage from the state. So we anticipate that probably within the next month, the next 2 months, I want to say, but don't hold me to
Right.
it.
Okay.
And then with that, then the next move is for the Planning and Zoning Commission to start looking at developing regulations. And again, there's another study that I'm sure
Let's
you'd
get
like
to
to
that
get
right now.
into.
Yeah, let's do
Sure.
that right now. What's that all about?
Sure. Well, that's called this was done by the Department of Transportation. It's called the Hartford Line DOT Action Plan, and they've done these studies for multiple towns and cities on the Hartford Line. And what they have done, or are in the process of doing, in Wallingford at least, they're taking right now, let's call it 3 blocks of properties that are on the west side of Route 5, right around the Joanna Fishbein Park in the old train station. And there's 3 blocks of properties. When I say blocks of properties, each block of property may have probably 2 to 3 to 4 properties in them. And they're looking at the developability of those properties based upon our existing regulations and to see what could be built in looking at the economics of building those properties, what it's going to cost, to construct, how many units you can put in there, whether it's residential, commercial units, what the cost of development is, the carrying cost, and coming up with a number for the cost of development, and then factoring, okay, what are the market rents? And with that, you're coming out with a model that gives you an idea of the economic value of the property. And with that, you can work back to what's the cost of the land, or what's the value of the land. And the benefit of that perhaps is for property owners in that general area, if they may be interested in selling their properties, they may have a better idea of what I don't want to say the true economic value, but at least what an independent third party thinks the value of the property is from a developmental standpoint based upon the regulations. So it gives people a better idea. I may think my home's worth $600,000. The reality is it may only be worth $300,000. So if I'm really interested in selling, I may have to, look and say, I may have to lower my expectations. It's not to say that people have high expectations as far as value, but it just gives people, I think, a better indication of what the market value may be.
Now, are the owners involved in these discussions?
Oh, no, not at all. This is
Okay.
a study that's being done simply by the Department of Transportation. It's undertaken by the state.
So I'm imagining this, and I don't want to put this. I want to put this in my own words. So some DOT planners get together, whatever their titles are, and they look at a map of downtown Wallingford, and they see where the roads are, and they look at a cluster of properties, and they say, that's a good spot for us to study and to analyze the economics of a development, and those clusters of properties are chosen because they have unusual, if put together.
No, because they're chosen.
They-
They're chosen because of location. Obviously, the locations that I mentioned
Okay.
are in let's say a heart of our downtown, but close to the heart of a downtown, and certainly some areas that
Okay.
we'd like to see developed. So they're looking to say that because I think is certainly, as you know, Chris knows, and probably most of the people in town know, that most of the properties in our downtown area are smaller properties, and there's multiple owners of these properties. So if a developer is coming in and looking to redevelop, you're going to have to accumulate properties most likely, especially in order to take advantage of the regulations that we put in place to perhaps the maximum. So you're looking to say if we can assemble these properties, 3 properties, 4 properties, to have a nice contiguous parcel, how can it be developed? And I think that to some degree is how you're going to see development of downtown. And that's probably one of the challenges, forgetting about the church on the hill and the
Okay.
cemetery and all of that. It's the smaller properties and multiple property owners, some of whom are not residents of the town and not residents of the state.
Absentee landlord. So
Yeah.
before I pivot to Chris, I want to nail down one point. So sooner or later, these property owners are going to know that their property was being reviewed for a theoretical
There's going to be
project or combination a project going forward. And is there a way of, after this study is developed, or is there a role for the town to get in there and kind of facilitate the different property owners getting together and forming some sort of consortium? Or
Well-
should the town step back?
No, I it's probably, I won't say it's for my place to say or not, but I would suspect that
It's an opinion show. Go
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
I would suspect that our economic development specialist, Tim Ryan, Tim has conversations, I think, with multiple property owners, whether they be, downtown or in other areas of the town. I feel very confident that he's been in contact with property owners discussing opportunities or discussing what their interest level may or may not be in selling their properties. In fact, I'm reasonably certain he has, and I think that's one of the things that he focuses on. But clearly, the report, again, it's with the DOT. I believe the Wallingford part of the report is almost complete, but because there's multiple towns that are involved in the overall report, that's not going to be released until all of those towns' reports are completed. And I'm being told it's probably in another couple of months. And clearly, once that's done, that's public information. And I'm sure that's something that certainly the Planning and Zoning Commission would look at. And the public would be, very interested in looking at that, and the property owners would be.
Chris, your thoughts?
I have a thought, but it's not, I
Go
want
for
to
it.
ask Jim an opinion question, but I don't want to put you on the spot. I mean, do you get frustrated with the town council? Because I hear, as a member of the council, I hear things going grocery shopping or just being out, a building's for sale. Why didn't the town buy that building? Why didn't you guys should have bought it? The one, you hear about different buildings here and there over the years, even before I was on the council. So I'm just curious from you're living and breathing this every meeting, this is your focus. And do you look at us and be like, come on, guys, do something, help these developers assemble You can do more, kind of to Mike's point, or not. Am I just projecting my own frustration?
Well, I
don't know.
think perhaps you're projecting your own frustration.
Yeah.
I think, as you know, the town is not necessarily a good owner of property. If you
Yeah, I
will.
know
I
it's
mean, we've had some properties that have, a couple of properties in particular that have sat waiting to be developed, and we've had plans to develop it, but unfortunately, we've had referendums
Right.
that have not occurred. I don't necessarily think the town should be, in my own opinion,
Sure.
that the town should be in the process of buying properties and then looking to work with a developer in an overall development plan. I think, in my mind, it stays best with with the developer. Although with some of the properties that we have right now, that may or may not be appropriate. But to use that on a going forward basis,
Right.
my own personal opinion, I don't.
Right.
There may be other things I'm frustrated with the council about.
Please,
At this
please.
point- at
Mike
this
wants to
point-
know. Mike wants to know.
No, I don't. We hear the words transit-oriented plan, transit-oriented development, transit-oriented regulation. Is it something other than what you've described?
I'm not sure what you're getting.
I'm not sure either,
I'm
but I
not sure
read in
what
the
you're-
paper, well, I read you a headline, and it goes back to 2016, actually. And the headline is, Wallingford adopts transit-oriented strategy. And it's not just Wallingford, I mean, it's towns
It's all
all
the
up and down
towns, sure.
Yeah, and I said, well, how's that different than common sense, regulation, given the
Well-
circumstances and they're prevailing? How's that different than?
I think to some degree it probably isn't. And
Okay.
in my mind, it's a nice name for it.
There we go.
We have the train station, and we, as well as other towns, are looking to develop, or take advantage of the train and looking to develop around the train station. So it's nice to say transit oriented. We could call it downtown development. I think you could call it many things.
Okay.
But it just relates to the more access by train.
So, Chris, you've heard Jim's briefing on all this, and I don't want to leave the downtown and go to the IX and I-5 and the other zones and the plan of conservation and development until we discuss how does this fit in, how does a Brothers parking lot fit in to what Jim has described? You're on the council, and recently the council bought the Brothers property, not a lot of land around that building, but they bought the restaurant, demolished it. So how does that fit into what you just heard?
I think it fits in a few different ways.
Okay, yeah. Then
I
we'll get to
think-
Jim and,
Yeah, I think
fact
from-
check you a little bit.
Sure, sure. That's what you like to do.
Yeah, I do.
I think from the council's perspective, that was sort of out there for a while. The property was for sale, and I think majority of us did not want to see that remain a restaurant. Have someone else come in, because it was kind of a turnkey. Someone else could have come in. Bradinsky's Pizza could have gone in there, and it could be Bradinsky's Pizza for 30 more years. And it was a little bit of an eyesore, and we felt that we wanted to jump on that opportunity as a council. So how does that fit in? Well, by making that into a nice parking lot, I think you look at some of the properties in the area where T-Bones used to be, we talked about. I think a parking lot there right across the street could help, influence a business to maybe want to move in there. Maybe we talked about the old train station. I think for several shows, we've basically kicked the Board of Ed out. You and I have
Yes, we did.
decided. I'm putting a brewery, and I forget what you're putting in, a park, an indoor park with
No, I
an
don't think I had
environmental
a.
center.
I don't think I had a. No.
Solar panel.
No, I'm looking
production
for a
place.
high-end
wine
steak.
bar.
No,
steakhouse.
steakhouse.
Right. We both.
Yeah, I want a high-end
Right.
steak.
So we've already solved that.
Yeah,
So we're doing that. So my point is, though, so there's another opportunity, because the town already owned a parcel. They already owned a piece of that parking lot, and now we have the Brothers piece. So I think it fits into that. In that regard, and I also think then that's, you go back to the transit-oriented district, and I kind of wanted to go back to that for 1 second to ask Jim a question, but it ties into this, is with the train, and I think of Parker Place. Parker Place, to me, is flourishing in terms of they've added 3 buildings. The 4th building, I don't know if people are occupying it yet, but I think it's done. I know people are in the 3rd building and the 2nd. My mother-in-law moved in there from out of state. She loves it. So it feels like when the train station came a few years ago, there was a lot of. I mean, it was coming. We couldn't really do anything about it at that point, and there was an argument: is this worth it? And the Tim Ryan was saying, yeah, it's going to attract millennials, and then seniors. They want to walk places. I feel like that argument's prevailing. When I look at Parker Place and I see the people that come in and out of where my mother-in-law lives, it's exactly that demographic. They can walk right down to where Brothers used to be, and if we can get more businesses there, it's more walkability. So I guess my question is, do you see it the same way, like with Parker Place? Do you think that the train, it is working? We're beginning to draw the young professionals and the seniors, or is it a mirage?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm not sure who we're drawing, because I'm not sure who's renting those.
Right.
You may have more information
Yeah.
about that as far as who's renting those apartments.
Yeah.
But clearly, that's has been a very nice addition to that area. I tend to agree with you with the Brothers property now, the Brothers parking lot. This is where I hope that the town council or the mayor looks to make that into a parking lot. I mean, right now, yeah, it's a parking lot, but it needs to be brought up to the standards of a parking lot.
Right.
Which means you need to address zoning issues on that
Right.
from a parking lot standpoint. And as we were talking about looking at some of the parcels or blocks of parcels that are being looked at around that, around the old train station, clearly some of those have very limited parking. And with with a parking lot in that general area would certainly benefit the development of those, as you mentioned, of those parcels that somewhat surround it. The train station, again, I certainly wouldn't want to see the town ever sell the train station because of a
Oh,
historic
no,
use.
right, no, I think leasing.
But
it,
as far as,
Yeah.
certainly a concern would be with the train station. I know you folks have already moved adult education out. I think we all have to be sensitive to making sure we can find an appropriate location, because I suspect a good number of the people who take
Right.
advantage of that program probably live in that area or make use of public transportation. So I think that's an important thing. But as you look at Parker Place, and if in fact you're correct, there are a lot of millennials living there, they're certainly looking for other amenities, and to make use of that train station for whether it is a restaurant, a brew pub, something along that nature, certainly that'll draw people. And in fact, some of the surrounding properties or the blocks that I referenced are developed. And if you're looking for younger people, they're looking for more of that type of activity.
Right.
So a little history here. Back in 2018, October 23 to be exact, that's the date that the council appropriated the money to buy and demolish the brothers building. There wasn't a whole lot of discussion about what was going to happen to that property. Based on the minutes, it was brief, it was cursory, dare I use the word superficial, but the mayor took the position that if we're going to buy the brothers' property, it's going to be for parking. And I don't think anyone wanted to upset that apple cart, because everyone wanted to buy that property. But the minutes reflect that there wasn't unanimity about how to use that property, and that it's a little more complicated for some, not for others, but for some. And some had other ideas in mind. I know that we interviewed candidates this past fall for the town council, and many of them, if not all of them that we interviewed, thought that the first plan would be to try to monetize that property probably by selling it and having some sort of development go in there. Going back to the minutes of October 23, 2018, I'm reading from the minutes now. Councilor Morgenstein thinks it's important to say we are interested in attracting developers to come to town, and hopefully we are not just creating a parking lot. We are investing in lower downtown. Councilor Fishbein commented, our intention for this property is not to have a parking lot, but to incentivize development. He agrees with Councilor Morgenstein. Councilor Shortell commented,
Oh, God.
well, this is good.
What did I say?
I swear, this is good.
What did I say?
I promise. Just relax.
All right.
And take another cup of coffee. Councilor Shortell commented, they all want to see downtown development happen. He stated, if it does become only parking, it's still a great deal because we do have zoning requirements for parking for businesses and restaurants, and it will allow developers to invest. I'm the only one subscribing to the Brudzinski plan, which is, and I'm against the parking lot idea, because I think it's really a tragedy to take a large parcel in the center of an area and pave it over and have it sitting 2/3 empty for the next 5, 10, or 15 years. So I'm turning something into a parking lot, I think, is the last choice. It may be a necessary choice on an interim basis, but I think it's the last choice for a long, long time. Mayor Dickinson was of the opinion that the town should not be funding the parking requirements of private developers. That if they wanted to, develop a project, well, by golly, they got to provide their own parking, and the public parking, should be for other kinds of customers, whatever. But yet, I think everyone acknowledges that some sort of public parking is necessary and desirable. But the Brudzinski plan, as you know, Jim doesn't know, is take the maximum amount of property in that Brothers area, sure, carve out maybe a dozen or maybe 24 parking spaces, but to install there a knock your socks off park a green space, I mean, something worthy of being a destination in and of itself, maybe with a fountain or a splash pad with tulips and daffodils and flowers, a place you'd want to walk to rather than a parking lot that's probably not going to be used sufficiently for a long, long time, if at all. And a park that is sufficiently gorgeous will become a magnet for people who want to walk. I can envision moms and dads pushing their baby carriages to the splash pad or the fountain, and the properties around there will begin to gentrify, upgrade because of that park. And it's an immediate, you can do it within 2 years. It's an immediate benefit to all taxpayers, not only economically, which is more of a longer term, but it's an amenity that provides a beautification return. That kind of idea deserves to be on the table along with the other ideas of having it developed, turned into a structure, along with we got to hold that spot in reserve and fund developers that want to come in and build without providing adequate parking. I think they all three got to be on the table, but the status of things now, it's only parking. That's the idea. The money is in place. The bureaucracy is, all set to pull the trigger on it. And once that happens, I think all the other options come off the table and we slide into that decision. Your thoughts, and then Jim, your thoughts.
I don't hate that.
Oh,
I don't hate it, but I guess I would say, yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. We can walk, we can push our strollers, we can go.
It's a dream, I agree.
We can go to the vacuum repair shop when we're done and get our vacuums repaired, because that'll be right there, because that's not going anywhere. And then we can go get to the package store that's there. I guess my question is why, I don't understand if it becomes a parking lot.
Yep.
So let's say that 3 years goes by. So for 3 years, you have that parking lot now in place. And it's a nice parking lot. And and in 3 years hence, the developer comes and says, Eastern Mountain Sports comes in and says, I want to buy this, what used to be the brothers' parcel and the parcel the town already owned. So you sell it to them. They build a multi-use building, or they build something that has retail on the first floor. You know what I mean? Like, so that is, to me, how does that come off the table if it's a parking lot? I don't understand how we can't I mean, I guess, what's wrong with that? Could that happen or not?
No, Eastern Mountain Sports, if you will it, and if we build a parking lot,
couldn't they come in
Eastern Mountain Sports will come in. That's your assumption. I'm saying I don't think that's really going to happen. And so
will it happen?
Hold on. But the could-haves are a dangerous way to plan, in my view. Okay. Because what you could be left with is a parking lot 1/3 filled, which is the worst possible choice, again, to turn open space into a tarred paved surface. Mm-hmm. The risk you run is it stays 1/3 filled forever because someone has dangled a dream that Eastern Mountain Sports is going to come in and their customers are going to want to have parking.
Well, no, they build. You're missing. No, they would build on the parcel.
No, I know they build somewhere else.
No, I'm saying they would build.
I think Chris is talking about they're actually building on the parcel.
They're building on the lot.
That is one of the options,
right,
that I suggested earlier should stay on the table for further discussion.
But why wouldn't it? My point is
that is, if we could get Eastern Mountain Sports to commit, but that's not going to happen.
Okay, but in 3 years,
Talbot's is not going to come there.
Why can't you build over a parking lot? So if there's my point is, why couldn't they, if it becomes a parking lot?
You could build over a parking lot.
That's what I'm saying. It could become a building. So, right?
But we need to pull the trigger on this. Right now it's going to be paved for about $165,000. At least that's the money that's been appropriated.
We don't know.
It's in the budget. Well, it's in the budget.
It's in the budget, but we don't know until the design comes in.
It's been sitting in the account since, what did I say?
2014.
Since 2014. Right. $165,000 have been sitting there doing absolutely nothing. So let's pull the trigger on it. We have brothers. We got that basically in 2018. Jim is here, and all kinds of things are happening. Put it on the council to build an underground parking lot and do whatever you want with the top and see how far it gets you. I mean, see what happens. Do it. I mean, frequently have commented how long it takes to do things in Wallingford.
Right.
It seems like it takes forever. And I'm here pounding the table. Well, if you believe in that, do it. Make the motion, get it second, get some votes lined up, and override Mayor Dickinson's veto and appropriate a couple $1 million. And we'll bond it or something. I mean, I don't know.
Wait, so you're saying, now you're saying the parking lot's not happening? What do you say? You're all
I'm
fired
saying,
up.
no, I'm saying,
Do what?
if that's the vision you have,
The vision
Bring it
I
up.
have is that
Bring it up.
the vision I have is that I like a parking lot for now, and if it always, as I so
Yeah.
eloquently said
Right.
at that meeting, I was wrong though on one point. It doesn't meet any zoning regs. I think I thought that it would like count. Anyway, but the intent of what I said, if it becomes a parking lot forever, okay, because maybe that helps other businesses.
and that's our divide. I find
But
that
our other
unacceptable.
divide is
Yeah,
that if this is the parking lot, in 5 years, someone could say, I'm going to buy this piece of land that's now a parking lot, and I'm going to build over it. I'm going to use it to Councilor Fishbein and Councilor Morgenstein's point. And my whole thing is, you can do that to a parking lot. It's a flat piece of asphalt. Yes, you'll take down some nice lights maybe, but at the end of the day, a park, you're not going to pave over a park.
No,
You
not
would
gonna
chain
pave over a
yourself to
park.
the fountain and not let them
For
come
those
in.
5 years, folks are going to walk to that park and
Right.
enjoy the fountain and the splash pad, and that's the return. And businesses are going to see a vibrant park that's really gorgeous, and it's going to gentrify the other alternatives.
Okay.
So, but this discussion has to be had by people that have votes, power, money, authority. This discussion needs to be had. So we're going to go back to Jim. Because it's not only the zoning commission, it's the planning commission, planning and zoning commission. There's a planning function.
Yeah.
Jim, we kind of went at it, and we're going to continue this discussion ad nauseum.
For the rest of my natural life.
Future Citizen Mike
Good luck.
shows. I know. What's your reaction to all this?
Well, I think you both bring up some very good points. I mean, your idea, I guess I wouldn't really vote for a splash pad. I don't think there's going to be much use for that.
You've had your little splash pads, haven't you?
Well, I guess that we could turn the splash pad
have
into
a
an ice
fundraising
skating rink or
drive.
something like that.
Yeah.
I think you bring up some good points as far as, because that could be or is somewhat of a gateway to our downtown, and could certainly make it very very attractive. I guess I would be perhaps more in favor of that, and even now I wouldn't rule it out, if we already had, if you would, that vibrant downtown in that area. My concern is that from a parking standpoint, if some of those surrounding parcels are in fact developed, becomes a parking requirement. And certainly we'd like to see a developer provide the adequate parking for whatever they're developing. In some cases, it may not be totally feasible. So there may be a need, for some additional parking. So I can see both of you gentlemen's points here.
Can we all agree it's worth further discussion in some...
I think whenever you're talking
Yeah.
about, there's very few ideas that are bad ideas. And there's very few ideas that don't deserve additional discussion and additional thought. Clearly, because that's what planning's all about. It's not coming up with one idea and pushing it forward. It's being able to take multiple ideas and trying to come to some common ground. Eventually, you may lose out, Chris may lose out, who knows? But as long as you have an honest discussion about it, I think that's important.
Chris?
This is a really basic question. When you mentioned this too. When you say developers provide, how does that work? Like in that area, how would a developer provide parking?
You'd have to provide the park. Well,
Like,
again,
what does that even mean?
Well, they'd have to provide the parking on their site. If what you're developing, there's parking requirements.
Right.
So you would need to be able to meet the parking requirements of the particular. If it's retail, the retail component, residential, the residential component. But I did mention, though, in our town center regulations, there's an offset. And if you needed 100 parking
Okay.
spaces, you could offset 65 of those spaces with making a contribution to the town. Or you could do some shared parking perhaps with, with one of an abutting property. Or you can put a bicycle rack and get in one spot.
Okay.
Before we leave that, those offsets are really cheap. I think that's a real good deal for a developer.
Oh, absolutely.
Cheaper than land, cheaper than building a garage. It's only, and you could probably mortgage, the cost of buying those parking, buying out of the
You certainly
parking
can't.
spots.
You can't construct a parking space for $2,000.
That's right,
And you
that's
can't.
right.
And you can't.
It's
maintain
really a
it.
good deal.
It's a one-time.
Yeah.
It's a one-time expense.
It's not per year. It's just once, and add it to your mortgage, and you're off and running. Did you have a
No,
follow-up
I'm good.
thought?
I'm good.
We're beginning to run out of time, and there's two things I want to cover. The first I want to cover, Jim, if you can do it in about 90 seconds,
Forget that.
what's cooking in the IX I-5 zone? What changes are planned and why?
Well, the changes, there's very minor changes, quite honestly, that's planned in the IX zone. That's to put in one or two additional uses. I think one of them was a call center, another one maybe financial institutions. But the main one is to reduce the percentage of open space. Right now, you need 50% open space. What's being proposed, and again, it's at our workshop in February, I encourage everybody to go to, it's reducing it from 50% down to 40%.
Now, this is the area near the intersection of Route 68 and Route 91, where the hotels are located. That's
Well, no,
generally
it's our whole IX zone is essentially, forms almost like a U, in that it starts at Barnes Industrial Park, and then it sweeps up to the north toward the Meriden line. It thins out when you get to the Meriden line, and then it widens out as you come. It's a portion of Northrop Road, and then it comes down Research Parkway to 68. So that's
Okay.
the IX zone. And the I-5 zone is in a portion of that in a portion of the N, and then it also goes across Route 68 on the, guess
Okay.
would be the south side. So
So-
that's what we're looking to do
So
there.
the idea now, the zoning requires sort of a campus layout, 50% grass,
We need
sort of,
exactly.
and 50% building. But under this, you could break out of your existing footprint and add to the building. if you
Exactly,
need
because
be,
we've had
and-
some people, and again, there's been a lot of, I think, a good deal of discussion with the EDC, with us in planning and zoning, as
Yeah.
well as some of the, businesses in that area where they want to expand. So now they need to expand. They're pushing against, I'm already,
At
I
maximum.
can't, I'm maxed out, so,
Okay.
that's the 40%.
Okay.
As far as getting to your question about the I-5 zone, what we're looking to do there is to include some additional uses in there. And again, that's through some recommendations from the EDC to include some additional uses.
McDonald's?
And some of those, no, and some of the uses, some
Gas
of those
station?
some of those, Mike, let me finish. You gave me 90 seconds. I got another 5. But some of those uses would be somewhat similar to what's in the IX zone. However, the intensity wouldn't be as great, and you'd have to cut back on some of the development of that.
There is a watershed area in there, isn't there?
That's correct.
And does that drive some of this decision-making on
Well-
permitted uses?
Well, it would drive some of the decision-making as far as not allowing some of the permitted
That's what
uses
yeah.
in there. Sure, we're very conscious about that. So those are the discussions that we have, and when we're looking to what you can do and what you can't do
Okay.
in the watershed area.
So in a very short period of time, I want to get to the implementation committee's role in monitoring the progress of the town's conservation and development plan. Do you want to open that up, or do you want me to open that up, or should we let's have Jim open that up. The
Got
POCD,
it.
Plan of
Why don't we flip a
Conservation,
coin?
Plan of Conservation Development.
Yep.
Required by state statute every 10 years. My take on it has always been it's very aspirational. A lot of ideas, some good, some bad, some questionable, are sort of collected in there. In the past, the POCD has sat on a shelf and not really been taken seriously. The only thing that's, I don't want to say the only thing, but one thing that's different this time around, and this is, I think, the third plan of conservation development that I've sort of been aware of, is that there's an implementation committee that is trying to, I don't know what. What's the implementation committee trying to do?
What we're trying to do is it has no authority to begin with to whether it's boards, commissions, to indicate what they can or can't do, but it's set up to track what progress is being made. And when you said the plan is sat on the shelf in prior years and hasn't done much, certainly we're doing a better job, I think, this time than what we've done in the past. Are we doing as good of a job as we can? Perhaps not. I think initially we set a very aggressive schedule to say, well, we're going to meet quarterly, and I think when you start looking at that, quarterly meetings turn into somewhat nothing meetings. Our last meeting that we had on it was in May of 2019. We're scheduling another meeting that's been scheduled for February. So I think the general sense is if we meet, whether it's every 6 months, every 9 months. And what we do is we have presentations from the various stakeholders in the plan of conservation and development. Certainly it's planning and zoning, it's the Board of Education, Conservation Commission, EDC, and asking for updates on what they've done versus the plan of conservation and development. In the plan itself, there's certain targets that were set up for various issues, and various commissions, boards assigned as the lead. Planning and zoning is an example. One of the top things was our downtown development in coming up with new regulations, which we've done. The other is with the IXI5 zone to look for additional uses there. So it's I won't say trying to keep people's feet to the fire, because that sounds a little bit too harsh.
Too hard. Okay.
But at least trying to keep everyone's focus, on that, and on what some of the responsibilities are. So again, I think we're doing a better job than what we've done in the past. Are we doing as good of a job as we possibly can? I think time will tell.
So just a couple of minutes. I want to take one of the goals or something, I don't know quite what to call it, that is in the job jar of the town council. As I understand the plan of conservation development and the implementation plan, various different agencies have been assigned. They didn't voluntarily assume it, I don't think, but they were assigned the job of shepherding the decision-making, guiding the decision-making process. It doesn't necessarily mean that they even want to accomplish what's in the POCD, but they've got to tackle the subject matter, I guess, and put it to bed. And this is going to develop into another show.
I can't wait.
When you and I discuss it. But the town council has been assigned the job of leading this discussion. Disband the Community Lake Restoration Committee and reform it as a Community Lake Recreational Area Committee to explore potential uses that will capitalize on and showcase the Community Lake area, including the former Choate Boathouse property, make recommendations and identify funding sources, because the POCD is not self-funding. It takes money to do almost everything here. The committee should have representation for Parks, Recreation, Youth Services, Wallingford Public Schools, Conservation Commission, Engineering, Planning, Town Council, Quinnipiac River Watershed Association, and River Advocates, among others, and talk about potential future uses to explore STEM Academy, Nature Center, or Community Center. There's a second rule of organizational behavior, that the best way to kill an idea
From a committee?
is to send it to committee. Yeah.
With a task like that.
So, Chris, I guess, do you have a hand in this, in this particular?
You have to understand, Mike, when I go to sleep at night, on my bedside, there's a Bible, and then there's the POCD. I mean, it's just...
Attaboy.
That's just...
Attaboy. I like that. Yeah, I like that.
You know what? No, I don't have. I mean, there's no mechanism. As Jim said, there's no mechanism to enforce any of this, and there's no mechanism to fund it, as you just said. As far as the buckets of what's assigned to the council, you're right. I didn't pick these buckets. I think Fishbein and Letourneau picked these because they were on the POCD committee. So now Tom Laffin and I are on the committee. We've been focused on the train station one. We've had some meetings with Casey, and that's to make a recommendation for the old train station. That's all it is. Make a recommendation. I know you want us to lease it, and you exercise our charter powers.
No. Don't quote what I want. Don't quote what I want.
But anyway, to go back to your point, this community lake. No, I haven't had one. I haven't thought about this. I don't have an opinion on it. I think Parks and Rec should do it. That's my opinion. I mean, what do you think?
I think the health department should do it.
Okay. Let's assign them. Let's take our name. Is Casey watching?
I think you should disgorge this from your job jar with the same due dispatch that you got it. Just put it on the agenda and say, we reject the responsibility, and kick it back to Jim Seichter and let him reassign it.
It's not Jim's fault. I mean, it's not
Well, first of all, just to clarify, there was
Yeah.
no job jar where fished out and said, we'll take this one. The consultant who was working with the town in developing the plan was the one primarily that assigned this. Again,
Okay.
it wasn't, planning and zoning, or it wasn't, it was looking at who would be the people or the entities that would be in the position to best handle this.
okay.
And that's how I think
I just
these
like to
things
blame
were
Fishbein
assigned.
and Letourneau
Certainly
whenever I can
can.
blame them. But to your point, there's another one in here. Create a townwide facilities plan. To me, that's an administrative function. Like, to me, that we could try to do it.
Who was assigned that?
Town council.
Okay.
So, the mayor has oversight over all of the town buildings. We don't have oversight, and so that's another one. So I think we agree.
Yeah.
We agree. February 24th. That's the meeting. Laughlin and I will be there. We'll see what we.
Jim, thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show. We have run out of time. We appreciate it. Our viewers have learned a lot, and you've been a good sport to sit through this. And again, we thank you, and our viewers thank you. Thank you for watching the Citizen Mike Show. We're here on Wednesday nights, but you can catch the Citizen Mike Show on Thursdays at 9, Fridays at 9, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays at 9 on WPAA. Susan Huizenga, Executive Director, and that's why we've said for years and years, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. But more recently, we are on YouTube, so go to YouTube and search the Citizen Mike Wallingford channel, follow all the usual prompts, and you'll get the show there. Let me know if you want me to email you a link directly to the YouTube production, so to speak. I'll be happy to do that. And thanks to Bruce Haig in the booth for making the show, all that it is, and working the cameras and the sound and everything else. And Chris Shortell, we have 10 seconds left. If you would give us a spoiler alert as to what's happening next week.
Next week.
Yeah, next week.
Which camera do I look at? Next week.
I don't know.
On the Citizen Mike Show.
I'd
It's
cover
going to
your
be
eyes.
history on the Citizen Mike Show.
Oh, jeez.
For I believe the first time
Yeah,
in the 10-year history of the Citizen Mike Show.
go ahead. You only got 10
Mike
seconds.
will not be. I will be hosting the show. Mike will be on vacation. I was going to lead off the show by saying you were suspended from WPAA, but now I can't because now we've spoiled it.
Yep.
Mike will be off, and I will have a guest, a very special guest, a town councilor. I'm not going to reveal who. Should I reveal who?
Joe Marone
Joe
would
Ma-
never know. Would never know if you mentioned his name.
Joe Marone and I together on the Citizen Mike Show. Must see a very special Citizen Mike Show.
This is awful. Thanks, everyone. Good night. Stay safe.